This is a slideshow of pictures of artists who have used colour in their work. Artists have always used colour in their work, of course, even as far back as cave paintings. Artists used to take earth to make colours, and then following on from that, during the Renaissance, gold became a very important colour in work, and then more exotic colours like blue from the Far East. But these are a selection of painters who use colour as a force in their work, and indeed sometimes colour is used as the only element of the work. So what you need to do now is you need to listen to the slideshow and you need to note the key facts which may come up as bonus questions in the test. So we're going to start off with William Turner, who was a British artist from the 19th century, interested in landscape, but he really exaggerated the colour of the sunsets and the skies, especially because he wanted to express and use colour in his art. His expressive use of colour at this time in art was quite unusual. So we have a series of landscapes by Turner, 3 in fact. Next we're going to look at Henri Matisse, who was a French artist. We're now moving into the end of the 19th century. He died in the middle of the 20th century. Matisse was part of a group of artists called the Fauves, which is French for wild beasts because of their wild and exaggerated use of colour. They even changed things like skin tones using greens and reds and really exaggerating colours so they look quite striking next to each other. Another example of a Fauve artist was André Derain. He was again part of this group called the Fauves. And here you see, although Derain was a French artist, he did work in London for a period, and here's a picture of the River Thames. Next we go on to a purely abstract painter. So it's difficult to see what this work is about. Patrick Heron was an English painter working in Cornwall. Many of his paintings are very large, and as I said, they include these large, abstract, colourful shapes. Very modern, very vibrant, and all about the pure power of colour rather than representing an object or detail. Next we have probably one of the most famous British artists of the 20th century. You've got an individual called David Hockney. He spent time as part of the British pop art scene. He works now in California and in Yorkshire. This is a Californian landscape where you can see he's really exaggerated the perspective of the work, but more so the colour. Next we have a painter called Howard Hodgkin. He's a British painter and his work is based loosely on landscapes, but they're still very abstract. He loves to use bold colours and his work is very distinctive, I think. He's also one of the few people who paint the frames too, and the frames actually become part of the work itself. Next, we have a series of work by Jasper Johns. Jasper Johns is an American artist from the middle of the 20th century. He produced a series of work based on targets and flags. The flags aren't shown here. He's still working today. Again, use of bold colour and striking images. Vasily Kandinsky was a Russian artist. He also wrote about the theory of colour and its emotional effects. So here we have 3 landscapes by Kandinsky. You can get a sense of the horizon and the sky in the work, and some buildings and mountains, etc., but they are still quite abstract. Here we have one example of work by Roy Lichtenstein, American pop artist. So he's obviously very much influenced by comic books and flat colours and black outlines. Moving on, we have 3 examples of work by Franz Marc. who was a German expressionist painter. Expressionists distorted their pictures and the colour to make the images more powerful and expressive. Franz Marc was particularly interested in animals, especially horses and forest scenes. Next we have another German expressionist called Emil Nolde. Again we see exaggerated colours, but they're certainly not as angular as Franz Marc. Franz Marc was influenced by Cubism. This is a painting by Pablo Picasso, probably the most famous Picasso painting, which is in a British art gallery today. It's called The Weeping Woman. You can see a very angular cubist style, quite jagged. Can you see how the jagged effect is like Franz Marc's work? But obviously Picasso came before Marc. We move on to another one example by a British painter called Bridget Riley. Bridget Riley is a painter still working today who paints op art. Op art is short for optical art, and where the colours can play games with one's eyes. Quite distinctive work, quite powerful work. Next we have three pieces of work, again purely abstract piece of work by Mark Roscoe, an American artist working during the 20th century. Died in about 1970, I think. Very famous artist who was working in New York after the Second World War. Produced work known as abstract expressionism, where colour and simple shapes can have a strong emotional effect on people looking at the paintings. Next we go back to the 19th century and into the 20th century with George Seurat, who you looked at when we looked at some of his drawing work. He's especially famous for his paintings of everyday French life. The paintings are made up of tiny dots. So, for example, yellow and dots placed next to each other, when you stand back, merge together and give the effect of green. This is a technique called pointillism. Think about it as using the very point or the tip of the brush to create these dots. Last but one, we have three paintings by Vincent van Gogh, Dutch artist, as you know. Paintings among the most valuable of all artists today. He loved to use bold, exaggerated colour and thick paint. His work is instantly recognisable, I think, and he tragically shot himself at the age of just 37. And finally we have Andy Warhol. Here we see a picture he produced of Marilyn Monroe, the actress from the 1950s and 60s. He was probably one of the most famous American pop artists, obsessed by celebrities and everyday objects. His work is often based on black and white photographs onto which he prints these bold colours to really show how colour can add an effect to a work and make it far more striking and memorable. So those are the artists you are going to have in your test. Again, the pass mark is going to be 80%. So you're going to see 20 pictures in random order, and you are going to need to get at least 16 out of the 20 correct to achieve a pass mark. So good luck.